Paul McCartney has spent over 6 decades in the spotlight, but despite his legendary status, he's never lost his playful spirit. Whether he's cracking jokes in interviews or pulling pranks on fellow musicians, Paul has always had a knack for bringing humour into his everyday life. Here are some of the best light-hearted stories about the Beatle, who always knows how to keep things fun. Paul McCartney has always been effortlessly cool, but even rock legends have their clumsy moments. One chilly night in December 1965, Paul was cruising through Liverpool on his moped when, bam, he took a spill. The fall left him with a chipped tooth and a busted lip, a less than ideal look for a heartthrob Beatle. Rather than wallowing in embarrassment, Paul did what he does best. He rolled with it. Instead of trying to cover up the damage, he decided to grow a moustache while his lip healed. And because the Beatles were the ultimate trendsetters, his bandmates soon followed suit. Before long, all 4 of them were sporting facial hair. By the time Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band rolled around, their mustachioed look had become iconic. So, in a way, that little moped accident didn't just change Paul's face, it changed the face of an entire musical era. Just another example of how even a minor mishap in Paul's world somehow turns into a cultural moment. Paul McCartney has never been one to take himself too seriously, which is probably why he was a perfect fit for The Simpsons. When Paul and his wife Linda guest starred in the 1995 episode Lisa the Vegetarian, Paul made a special request. If Lisa was going to give up meat, she had to stay vegetarian for the rest of the series. The show's creators agreed, and Lisa has been proudly meat-free ever since. But Paul being Paul, he didn't stop there. He added his own little Easter egg to the episode, one that only the most dedicated fans would discover. He joked that if you played his song, Maybe I'm Amazed backward during the end credits, you'd hear a secret message. And sure enough, if you reverse the audio, you can actually hear Paul reading out a recipe for his favourite lentil soup. That's peak McCartney, spreading his love for vegetarianism in the sneakiest and funniest way possible. And honestly, who else could turn a soup recipe into a rock and roll legend? Paul McCartney may be a musical genius, but who knew he had some serious strength too? Back in 1993, Paul made a legendary appearance on Saturday Night Live, where he charmed the audience with his usual wit and warmth. But the real highlight came at the end of the show, when the cast gathered on stage for the closing farewell. As everyone cheered and waved, Paul, out of nowhere, wrapped his arms around comedian Chris Farley and lifted him clean off the ground. That's right, Sir Paul. In his 50s at the time, casually hoisted Farley, a man known for his, let's say, solid build, as if he were picking up a guitar. The audience erupted in laughter, and even Farley looked momentarily stunned before cracking up. It was one of those spontaneous, ridiculous, and completely unforgettable moments that only Paul could pull off, proving that not only does he have musical chops, but apparently some serious muscle too. Meeting Paul McCartney is a dream for most fans, but for Irish broadcaster Ryan Tubridy, it turned into a hilariously awkward disaster. Tubridy had the chance to meet Paul at an event, and like any self-respecting Beatles fan, he was determined to make a good impression. Unfortunately, fate had other plans. First, in his excitement, Tubridy went in for an overly enthusiastic shoulder pat, a move that immediately felt weird and unnecessary. Then, while posing for a photo with Paul, he realised, too late, that he had a giant piece of chicken stuck in his teeth. And as if that wasn't enough, in his nervousness, he blurted out something completely nonsensical, something so embarrassing that he later admitted he wished the ground had swallowed him whole. Through it all, Paul, ever the gentleman, smiled and carried on, as if nothing had happened, making Tubridy feel slightly less like a flustered fanboy. It was a perfect example of Paul's easygoing nature, handling an awkward moment with the same grace he brings to his music. And hey, at least Tubridy walked away with a funny story and hopefully a newfound awareness of post-chicken dental checks. Imagine being a parody artist and walking into a room only to have one of the biggest rock legends of all time recognize you first. That's exactly what happened to Weird Al Yankovic when he met Paul McCartney at a film screening. Al, expecting to introduce himself, barely got a word out before Paul lit up and said, "Oh, Weird Al, Linda, look honey, it's Weird Al." Al was completely floored. Here he was, standing in front of a Beatle, and instead of him fanboying over Paul, Paul was fanboying over him. It was a classic McCartney moment, showing his awareness of pop culture, his respect for fellow musicians, even parody ones, and his ability to make people feel special. It's one thing to be recognised by a Beatle, but to have Paul McCartney excited to see you, that's next level rock star validation. If you were famous in the 1960s, you had to deal with some crazy rumours, but Paul McCartney might have had the weirdest one of all. At the height of Beatlemania, a bizarre conspiracy theory took hold. Paul was dead and had been secretly replaced by a lookalike. Fans scoured album covers and song lyrics for clues, convinced that hidden messages confirmed their wild theory. Now, Paul could have gone on a serious media campaign to shut it down, but where's the fun in that? Instead, he played along with the madness. When a journalist finally caught up with him and asked if he was, in fact, dead, Paul, without missing a beat, quipped, "If I were dead, I'd be the last to know." He even added fuel to the fire with the Abbey Road album cover, where he walked barefoot, a supposed sign of a corpse in some cultures. Whether intentional or not, it only made the rumours wilder. But Paul never seemed bothered by it. After all, if you can't beat the crazy, you might as well have a little fun with it. Paul McCartney has played the biggest stadiums in the world, but sometimes he just likes to shake things up. In 2022, he decided to treat fans in New York City to something completely unexpected. A last-minute, totally unannounced concert at the tiny Bowery Ballroom. No stadium, no advance hype, just Paul, his band, and a room full of people who had no idea they were about to witness a rock legend up close. Word spread fast, and within hours, 500 lucky fans packed into the venue, barely believing their luck. When Paul took the stage, he launched into a 2-hour set that spanned his entire career. Beatles hits, Wings classics, solo gems, the works. The best part? Tickets were only $50. Yep, the guy who could sell out arenas in minutes decided to put on an intimate, affordable gig just because he felt like it. For those lucky enough to be there, it was the kind of once-in-a-lifetime experience you'd brag about forever. But for Paul, it was just another night of doing what he loves, playing music, surprising fans, and proving that even after all these years, he's still the coolest guy in the room. Even rock legends love a little playful rivalry, and Paul McCartney has never shied away from poking fun at his old pals in the Rolling Stones, especially Mick Jagger. One of the funniest moments came when Paul was chatting with some fans backstage. The group had just seen Mick perform, and one cheeky fan turned to Paul and said, "Well, you've got big shoes to fill after that." Without missing a beat, Paul smirked and shot back, "He's got big shoes, all right." It was classic McCartney, sharp, witty, and delivered with just the right amount of mischief. Of course, Paul and Mick have been trading jabs for years, always in good fun. Paul has jokingly called the Stones a blues cover band, while Mick has playfully suggested that the Beatles were never as good at playing live. At the end of the day, though, there's nothing but respect between the two, but that doesn't mean Paul will ever pass up the chance for a well-placed zinger, especially when it comes to his old friend Mick. Sometimes the best stories behind songs come from the most random moments, and that was definitely the case with Rocky Raccoon. It all started with an accident, of course. In 1965, Paul had a little mishap while riding his moped in Liverpool. He took a spill, bruised himself up, and ended up needing some medical attention. But instead of letting it be just another rock star injury, Paul decided to use the experience as fuel for his creativity. The strange part? It wasn't just the accident that inspired Rocky Raccoon, it was also the bizarrely drunk doctor who treated him. The man's rambling and unhelpful demeanour struck Paul as so comically absurd that it wound up in the lyrics of the song, adding a quirky edge to the otherwise mellow tune. In typical McCartney fashion, he turned a little disaster into a whimsical piece of songwriting. Instead of getting frustrated over a banged up lip, he channeled the chaos into one of his most memorable tracks. It's a testament to Paul's creativity that, even in a less than ideal situation, he could spin it into a story that still makes us smile today. If there's one thing Paul McCartney takes seriously, it's his vegetarianism. So, when Weird Al Yankovic approached him with the idea of parodying Paul's hit Live and Let Die with a funny song called Chicken Pot Pie, Paul didn't exactly roll out the red carpet, the idea of a meat-based parody of one of his most famous songs. Yeah, that wasn't going to fly. Paul politely but firmly turned him down. "I can't allow it," he said, "because I'm a vegetarian and I can't be endorsing chicken in any form." It was a classic McCartney move, standing by his principles in the most charming way possible. Even though Paul could have easily played along for the laughs, he stuck to his guns, showing that when it comes to his values, he's as steady as they come. Weird Al took the denial in stride and later said he totally understood, but it's funny to think about how Paul's commitment to his plant-based lifestyle became a roadblock for one of the world's most beloved parodists. And honestly, it's just another reason to love Paul. He knows when to keep it light-hearted, but he doesn't budge on the things that matter to him. Paul McCartney isn't just a music legend, he's also one of the funniest, most down-to-earth rock stars to ever walk the planet. Whether it's pulling off spontaneous pranks, handling ridiculous rumours with grace, or turning awkward moments into pure comedy gold, Paul's humour has always been an essential part of his charm. From deadpan jabs at Mick Jagger to deadlifting Chris Farley, Paul's quick wit and playful nature make him not just a musical icon, but a guy who's always in on the joke. And through it all, he's managed to stay humble and approachable, never losing sight of what truly matters, bringing joy to the world, whether through a song, a surprise concert, or a silly lentil soup recipe. So the next time you hear a Paul McCartney tune or see him cracking a joke, just remember, this guy's got a heart as big as his talent and a sense of humour to match.